Hi everyone, my name is Agnes Fries and I'm the creator of the online design tool called the Grid Designer. The Grid Designer is a drawing tool for creating craft color charts. You can use the Grid Designer to make charts for crafts like knitting, crochet, latch hook, cross stitch, and anything else where you need a grid-based color chart. As you're listening to this video, there are 3 things I'd like to ask you to do. 1, if there's content in the video that's useful for you, please click the like button at the bottom of the screen. If you want to see more content like this, click the subscribe button on the lower right corner of the screen. If you have any questions or comments, please leave me a comment below the video. Thanks for watching. In this video, I'm going to show you different options for resizing your project grid. It's going to include a complete, how do you rescale your drawing, making it larger, making it smaller. If you've done something with a digitizer, this can be really useful. If your final thing that you took out of the digitizer was not exactly what you wanted, I'm going to show you how you can, make that, enlarge that, or reduce it. I'm also going to show you how you can add borders to the edge of a project and how you can also clip off the edges of your project. All of these things are going to be done with the grid size option, which I'm going to show you in the Grid Designer. So here I am at freezeworks.com, and I'm just going to go to the Grid Designer here. So this is the 20 by 20 default project. And what I'm going to do is draw a little bit of stuff on here so that as I resize this and rescale it and things like that, we can have something to kind of refer to. So first I'm going to let's draw some stuff in the middle here. And then maybe we'll draw some other color on the outside here. Something we can, clip off and that kind of thing. Most of this video is going to be done with the display menu grid size option, which is right down here. At the very end of the video, I'm going to also show you a little bit about adding and deleting rows here, because that's another way that you can change the size of your grid. Although this is not what this down here doesn't do any rescaling or anything like that. But the grid size option in here, now with beta 08 version, it allows you to completely rescale drawing. So I'm going to show you some basic things about this first. So let's go to grid size. Okay, so up at the top is the current number of rows and columns. That's 20 by 20, and that's a reference for you as you change the information down here. Okay, the simplest way to change the number of rows and columns is to just change their values right in these boxes here. So let's say we made this 40 rows and 30 columns. Okay, then you have to decide how you want your picture to be drawn within that 40 by 30 rectangle that you're going to get. You could rescale it into that, which would stretch it and make it a little bit longer than it actually is, or we can just add things onto the outside. So down here is a diagram. And as you change these values, this diagram will change and show you where it will currently, the way the current settings are, it'll show you where it's going to add the columns and add the rows that you're putting in up here. So we went from 40 to we went from 20 to 40, so we were adding 20 rows to this, and we went from 20 to 30, so we're adding 10 columns to it. And right now it's being added on the right side or the bottom. That's the default option for this dialog. So we say save changes, and if we do that, it adds all the columns over here to the right side and all the rows to the bottom. We can undo that. Let's go back in here. And if we go back to what we had, which was 40 by 30, okay, then we've got plus 10 and plus 20. We could take this 20 rows, and instead of adding them to the bottom, we could add them, say, to the top, like that. If you wanted to add some extra, something extra to your grid on the top, you could do it like that. You can also split them, and it will split them, 10 and 10, top and bottom. If you want to add, if you're thinking of mostly you want a kind of a border around your original picture. And the 10 over here, we could also put that on the left. So now it shows up, now it would be adding 10 columns on the left. Or if we go down here and we pick both left and right, then it's going to split them on the left and the right sides. Okay, so if we do it like this, so we're going to, then we would have 5 extra columns over here, 5 extra columns over there, 10 at the bottom, 10 at the top, and we say save changes, and it goes and does that. Now, anytime it adds rows or columns onto your drawing like this, it's always adding them with the background color. And so if we had wanted it to be a different color on the background, we could have switched that first. Let me just do that real quick. So let's say the outside border is going to be yellow. We can go in display, grid size. We'll go to do our 40 and our 30. And we'll split them top and bottom and left and right. Say save changes. And now we have them yellow. So anything that's ever added as a row or column with that grid size dialog is going to add it in the background color. So you can always change your background color if you want to before you add that, and it will add it in the color that you want. Otherwise you get the background color. Same thing is true for this option down here. When it adds or deletes columns, it adds them using the background color. Okay, so let's undo that. Let's go back to using the red. Okay, let's go back in here to grid size. Okay, now let's go, we'll put 40 and 30 in here again. Okay, and down here at the bottom is a checkbox that will allow you to scale the existing drawing to fit whatever the new size is. So if we check this box, then these things are no longer important because it doesn't matter where it's adding the rows. It's only the final size that matters because we're going to take the drawing and we're going to expand it to fit into this 40 by 30 rectangle. So if we just do that, 40 by 30, and we say scale existing drawing to fit, and we say save changes, then it's going to basically stretch it out into that 40 by 30 shape. So it went from 20 by 20 to 40 by 30. So it's stretched out kind of lengthwise. Okay, now let's try this one more time. Okay, now in addition to this checkbox down here where you're scaling your drawing, you can also check this checkbox up above. And this checkbox will maintain the original aspect ratio. That means it will maintain the same shape of the square. In this case, it's a square or the rectangle that you are resizing. So, but this will maintain the same aspect ratio. So that means that if I change one of these, say I go 21, it's going to basically automatically change the other one so that it's keeping it a square in this case because we started with the square. But if it was a rectangular area, you know, and it was it would still keep the same aspect ratio, the same ratio of the height to the width would stay the same. The same shape of that general rectangle is going to stay the same. As you change one of these, it will change the other one accordingly. So now let's go up and say, let's make it 40. Okay, so now it's got to be 40 by 40 to keep the picture looking in the same shape without stretching it. So we're now going to go down here, and we've still got scale existing drawing to fit, and we pick save changes, and now we'll rescale our picture. So now instead of 20 by 20, it's 40 by 40, and it actually stretched the whole picture out to fit in the same proportions that it was originally. So it didn't stretch it in any weird way. It stretched it just you know, exactly the way that it was originally. Okay, so let's undo that. So we're back to the 20 by 20. Okay, now we can also use the grid size dialog to cut off or to clip the edges off of our picture. Okay, So say we wanted to make this, well, first let's just scale the whole picture down. Let's do that first. Let's go down to 16 by 16. So it's going to be making it 4 rows and 4 columns smaller. And so long as we've got this scale existing drawing to fit, then it's going to rescale it down. So now it's going to make the drawing smaller. Okay, and it did lose some information here because it's trying to squash 20 by 20 into 16 by 16. And so particularly when you reduce the size of something, you're very likely to get some little bits of things that you might have to correct. Okay, so let's undo that. And now I'm going to do, now we're going to clip off the sides. Okay. So instead of scaling our drawing, suppose we want our drawing to be this same size that it is, but we don't want, some of the stuff that was on the side. So let's go down now and bring it down to like 16 by 16. Okay. And and this checkbox is off, so we're not going to be scaling the drawing to fit. So we're going to save changes. And then what it's going to do is it's going to cut off sections of it. And what it did was it cut off the right side and the bottom. And if we go back, let's see, let's do this on one more thing. Okay. Then that's where it was going to take these off from the right side and from the bottom. So it was set like this: 4 columns taken off the right side, 4 columns taken off the bottom. But you have some control over that because you can say whether you want these rows taken off from the bottom or taken off from the top or taken off from both the top and the bottom. So say we want 2 rows taken off of the top and 2 rows taken off of the bottom. And then here we've got the same thing we can do with the columns. We could take the columns off the left side, or we could take the columns off both left and right. So this is going to clip 2 rows and columns off of all the way around the entire picture, leaving the drawing scaled as it was. So it's going to actually clip the edges because this box is off. So now we say save changes. Let's make that a little smaller so it looks like that. So it's clipped off 2 on the top, 2 on the side, 2 on the bottom, 2 over here. And then we could put it back with that, or we can undo it. We can redo it. We'll take a look at what we have. Okay. So that will allow you to clip things off of the edge. It will allow you to put border on the edge, and it will allow you to rescale your picture larger or smaller. Okay, so now let's do this with something more interesting. Okay. Let's go down here and I'm just going to pick this sunflower that I have. Okay. Let's make it a little bigger. And I'm going to put my grid on here so that I can see it. Okay. So there's my sunflower. Okay. It's currently, you can see up here in the upper left corner, 150 columns wide and 113 rows. Now in this one, most of the time you don't want to stretch it, although you could stretch it in one direction or the other if you wanted to play with your picture and see what you could make. But I want to keep my aspect ratio the same, and I'm going to try and make this picture bigger, and then I'm going to come back and make it smaller so you can see how you would rescale something. This picture was created with the digitizer from a photograph that I took of sunflower in our yard. So I'm going to go back to grid size here. And what I want to do is I want to maintain the original aspect ratio, and I also want to scale my picture to fit. So if you're just scaling something like you had digitized or something like that, and you want to make it a different size, then you would check both of those boxes. Then let's say we want to make this 170 rows. Okay. So it automatically then calculates 226 to keep the rectangular shape the same. Uh, Basically, it's keeping the ratio of the height to the width the same. And to do that, it would be adding 76 columns and 57 rows. And it doesn't really matter in this case where we're going to put it because we're scaling our picture to fit it no matter where they're added. So here we're going to say save changes. Okay. And now you've noticed that the grid size got quite a bit smaller here. And we now have 226 columns and 170 rows. And we've resized our photograph to this larger size. So now let's do an undo. Okay, so that puts it back to the 150 by 113, or we could redo it. We can take a look at it and see if we like what we've got. Now I'm going to go back to the original one, and I'm going to show it being made smaller. So let's go to grid size here. Let's change the rows to, say, 90. And then the columns are automatically calculated, and vice versa. If you change the columns, then the rows get calculated. So either way, you change one, the other one gets calculated so long as this box is on. Then we say we got scale existing drawing to fit, and then we say save changes. Okay. So now we went down to 90 rows. So now we got 90 rows and 119 columns. So we've made it smaller. And we could make it smaller still. So let's go on and see how small we could make it and have it be kind of okay. Let's try 70 rows and see how that goes instead of 90. So we've taken off another 20 rows and rescaling our picture. Okay, it still looks pretty good. Still not too bad, you know. And so now we're down to 70 rows. Let's just try it one more time just to see. So there's 50 by 66. Okay, so that's how you would rescale your drawing. Okay, and the undo should take you back up. So I clicked it once, I click it again, and that takes us back to the 150 by 113, which was the original picture. And you could go back with the redo and go look at the smaller ones. Okay. Okay, so that's how you would do that with a full color picture. Now, let's suppose that we wanted to, let's go with one of the smaller ones. Let's stick with this. Let's stick with the 70 row one. Okay. Now let's suppose we wanted to add a border around the outside of this. Now remember when I added new rows and columns on the top and the right side and the bottom and the left side, then they're added using the background color. So I might want to pick the background color first. Let's see, what would I pick? Maybe a light blue. And then we'll go in here and we'll say grid size. And now, since I'm going to try to add a border on the outside of it, I'm going to turn this off because I don't want to change the inside picture. I don't want to scale the inside picture. So I'm going to turn that off. Then I'm going to go over here and I'm going to keep this maintain aspect ratio on for now and see what that gets me. So suppose that I added 10 rows, which could be 5 top and bottom. Okay. Let's try 6. And I get odd numbers, so I want it to be kind of an even thing. So I'm going to add 10 total rows, and I'm going to make them, here's the change in rows is 10, and I'm going to change the rows on the top and the bottom. So I've got 5 on the top, 5 on the bottom. Okay. And I'm going to do the same thing with my columns here. Let's make them left and right. But Because of this calculation where it's trying to maintain the aspect ratio, it's coming up with 13 rows. And I think what I want is I want to just have 6 and 6. So I'll turn this off, make this 105. Okay. So now I've got 6 and 6, 5 and 5, or I could take off a couple more if I wanted it to be 5 all the way around. So if I took off and made it 103, one off each side, then I've got 5 added to each side, okay, which would be nice for a border. So now let's go and say save changes, okay, and now what we've got is 5 rows and columns all the way around. We could use this to make some, you can also draw something in the border or do something like that, or add more or a different color, whatever you want to do. Um, but that's one way you can add a border onto the outside of your picture. Okay. Now I'm going to show you, oh, yeah, let me show you, there was an older way to rescale a picture using the paste method by selecting this. And so I'm just going to show you quick that that's still there, and you can actually resize a part of your picture. So now let's say we don't want the border. Say we had a border and we don't want the border, but we want it to be the same size to fill the border. Okay, so I just picked the selection tool down here, and then I held my mouse down over here, clicked, and then dragged across to get this selection rectangle here. So I'm going to paste this and resize it at the same time to be the size of the outer portion. So it's going to fill all the space now with the picture. We're going to make the picture a little bit bigger. So I'm now going to say cut, and don't panic at this point because your picture is still there in the computer memory. And so we're going to just do paste, and there it is. And it's here, it's in this little floating, you can drag this around and put it, different places. But I'm going to resize it to fill all the area that's in here. And so I would pick this custom change, which has the rotate and resize in it. So I pick that. And I want to go back to 80 rows. Okay. And if I have maintained the aspect ratio on, then when it calculates the actual columns, it'll be 106. But we kind of changed that before. We didn't maintain the aspect ratio for the border. We made this 103. So we'll make that 103. So we got 80 by 103. And then we say apply, and that's going to take our paste item and stretch it out to fill the border that was around it. And so we say apply, and now we've got our picture stretched out a little bit. Now it didn't maintain the aspect ratio totally, but it's very close, and so you don't really notice a whole lot of stretching if you don't change it too much. Okay, so it's still got this little dashed border around the outside of it. It's still a floating paste item over the canvas. So to apply it to the canvas, then we click the apply to grid button, and now it's on the canvas. Now we've got it. Okay, and so we've resized our picture then to kind of fill that border. Okay, last thing I want to show then is this add and delete rows. This is another way of changing your grid size. And you can use this to clip things off the sides like we were doing with the grid size tool under the display menu. And you can actually use it to add borders to things too, because you can both add and delete things. But where this one is actually different is that you can actually delete the rows and columns or add rows and columns in the center of your picture. And that functionality doesn't exist in the grid size area. So let's say we want to delete some rows. So we pick either rows or columns first, then we add or delete them. So I'll pick delete, then we say OK. And then your cursor changes to this little funny pointer here. And now I put the mouse button down, and I hold it down as I drag across here. And when I let my mouse button up, it's going to delete those rows that I selected. Okay, so now those rows are deleted. You can undo that, redo it, undo it. And then if you want to add rows, we pick rows, add. Then it needs to know, are we going to add the rows above the selection or are we going to add the rows below the selection? So you have to pick one of these. Let's say above the selection. Okay. And then I've got this funny little cursor again. And now I'm going to press my mouse button down, drag it down here. And now what it's going to do is it's going to insert as many rows as I select above my selection. So what have I got here? So let's say that looks like 4. So I selected 4 rows, and when I let my mouse button up now, it's going to insert 4 rows above where I selected. Okay. And it always inserts using the background color. So that's why it's that color blue. That's why it picked that color. Okay. And you can undo that also. Likewise, you can do this with the columns. We can delete columns, so we can go like that, delete the columns, undo that, and we can also add columns. Let's make it to the right of the selection. Okay, so say I selected 4 columns here, then it's going to insert 4 columns to the right of my selection and color them with the background color. So that inserted those there. Okay. So that's basically those options. And if you wanted to do it where you were adding a border on the side, you'd have to go over to here, say insert before the left side, and then you'd select 4 here, and it would insert 4 on the left of that, and then you would have a border there. So um, either way, you can do it on the edges or you can do it in the center of your project. So I think that's about it. Those are pretty much all the different ways that you can resize your grid. We had the display up here with grid size, which allows you to add things onto the edge or clip things off the edge or rescale your entire picture, either larger or smaller to whatever size you want it to be. And then there's also the paste tool where you can take a portion, you can select a portion of your project grid and go in here, select it with this, go in here, say cut, then paste it, and then you can actually resize it inside the paste tools to fill whatever space you want. You can make it smaller or larger in there. And the final thing that will change the size of your grid is this add and delete rows or columns, which will allow you to add and delete rows and columns inside the center of your picture. Okay, so it's kind of like there's pretty much a full range, I think, at this point, for being able to resize your pictures, rescale, add and delete rows and all that kind of stuff. Okay, thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.